All right, up next on the Chevy project, I'm replacing the steering rack because I'm getting a lot of side-to-side movement in the wheels without the steering wheel or the other wheel moving. It is also leaking. This is my new one, obviously. It was leaking here at the seal. It's also leaking here at the seal. Some of the fittings are also leaking. So I'm gonna be replacing this guy. I've already started. I've got my outer tie rod ends. My outer tie rod's disconnected on either side, so the knuckle's free. It's kind of a trick to get in here, but up in there I have to disconnect those two, the low pressure and the high pressure power steering pump lines. And I also have to disconnect the steering column shaft from the rack. And when doing this, you want to make sure that your steering wheel is tied down straight so you don't destroy the clock spring and alter your airbag operation. So I've already gotten that done, and I'm going to start with disconnecting the steering column from the rack. Well, here we are pressing out the U-joint. Already heated up either side, melted the pins, holding in place. Just had it pop. As you can see, it's pressing out. There's a new one right here. OEM. Updated with a grease zerk right in the X.
I guess the only way to get these U-joints out is to heat them up with a torch and melt the plastic pins. And that's what all this plastic is that oozed out of the little holes. Just heat them up with either oxyacetylene or a MAP torch, and that's all it takes. But you gotta melt them, because it wouldn't matter how much pressure you put on them with a U-joint press, they're not gonna wanna come out. And these are original GM from when the truck was built in 2005. So they were locked in with rust and all sorts of stuff.
Even have the pivot retainer at the back of the U-joint there.
There you go.
Man, that thing is toast. Take a look. It's gonna be freaking hot. Yep.
And then shine in here, that's the rust that was around it, and that's the receiver groove for that U-joint where the plastic is injected in and goes around this entire circumference and locks this in without exterior or interior pins. And the only thing that holds that U-joint in is that plastic. But there's no way to get it out until you heat it up and melt it out.
Smells like popcorn. So here we are installing the new U-joint. Pressing it in. This one's updated with a little grease zerk. Serviceable. So we lined up the caps in the hole. So we slipped in the U-joint, slipped it into one of the caps, and then we brought in the other cap from the other side and kind of evened out the U-joint in between. And then we started pressing. We got the one lined up here, it's pressed in, and now we're going to do the other side to make it even.
And then put in the retaining clips.
And then the retaining clips go on
each side after we verify the cap positioning.
So I've kind of begun the process of resealing the block while we're waiting on parts for the transmission. We got the U-joint in, as you saw prior. I pulled the steering rack in order to pull the oil pan and do the rear main seal. I'm replacing the steering rack. You don't have to pull it, but I pulled it out of the way anyways. Before I do that, I need to replace my valve cover gaskets. And I went ahead and pulled them on both sides. As you can see, there's quite a lot of buildup from leaks. It's kind of seeped past. All the needle bearings in the rocker arms feel okay. When I pull the motor, I'm going to be pressing in bushings instead of the needle bearings. So that's going to be an update, because those are prone to blow up at high RPMs, which detonates the motor. And this side I pulled, and I already prepped the surface. It's ready for the gasket. So, and everything seems fine on this side. Needle bearings are tight. And these are the valve covers. I want to clean them up before I press in the new seals. They're pretty dirty on the inside and the outside. So, want to clean them up. Plus it makes the motor look a bit better. The coil packs were actually pretty easy to pull off. There's just a few bolts that attach to the valve cover, as you can see. And it was like one main plug-in. All the coils are all plugged into that wire harness. So it really wasn't bad, and you pull off the breather tubes on the valve covers, and it was pretty easy. But one snapped on me. It was brittle. But oh well, preventative maintenance, right? Everything's starting to come together, so can't really be mad. But yeah, looks pretty sweet. It's nice to be finally getting to this truck. I'm enjoying myself right now. Alrighty, well this is day I don't even know anymore. I just got off work and I got my valve covers polished up in the jet washer, all cleaned up. It looked a lot worse. A few things showed up. I got some wire loom because all my stuff is brittle and it's falling apart. So if I don't touch it, it won't fall apart, but all the stuff that I have touched, I'm gonna have to replace that. So, and I ordered up some heater hose fittings. These ones are updated. I believe they're stainless, and they're updating it from the original plastic. If I can show you. Jeez, criminy. And it cracked on me as I pulled in. Wow, nice glare. Yeah, so they're all plastic. That one right there is cracked. So, replacing that guy with this guy. So, that came in. And also, my transmission mount came in from GM. Probably made in China, I betcha. But yeah, so that's in. So all the parts are accumulating quite nice. So now what I'm doing, I've already got the surfaces cleaned up from the other day. I'm gonna go back around and clean them up with some brake clean, just because they've been sitting for a little bit. And back here I got my other valve cover with the seal already on it. It's ready to rock and roll. It looks just as good as the other one. So yeah, we're ready. I am about to slap these suckers on. Then I'm gonna get to the oil pan. Well, got the valve covers on, torqued down to 80 inch-pounds. Got the coil packs back on, both sides. And everything's hooked back up. If I had a transmission in here, I could crank the engine over. But the starter's laying right there. And everything's out. Yeah, so everything looks very nice. Everything's plugged in. I had to replace my PCV tube because I snapped the sucker. So it's coming together. One step closer. So now I'm replacing the heater hose fitting. I already got the hose off, and here's the old fitting right here. I haven't found the crack yet. I'm gonna do some more looking, but I believe that to be right there. Little hole sprung. Here's the new guy. This is gonna work good. No holes. It totally eliminates any issues that could erupt. So just gonna splunk this sucker on there like that, and then this is gonna attach right there on the fitting, and I'm gonna do the same thing for the other one too. So today I am pulling my oil pan and my rear main. I didn't feel like videotaping all the BS I just went through trying to find a way to prop up the motor. I had my jack underneath the oil pan here, but obviously since I'm removing it, I needed to move the jack. I brought over my cherry picker, which is over there in the corner, brought it all the way over here, set it up, and was trying to brainstorm while pulling it over here where to lift from on this block. And there is not a single point that I could find to hold some tension off of the back of the block so the mounts didn't just, flip down. So my dad and I came up with this genius plan, which is redneck as heck, and I do not condone anyone doing what we did, but we put a 2x4 underneath the manifold, and it is working. So we're leaving it at that. It's working. It won't be forever, just for an evening while I pull the pan and the rear main. So I'm gonna drop all the oil out of it, and then I'm gonna start unbolting everything. I have to take out that cross member so the pan can pass the pickup tube. So I'm gonna get to it. So I got the oil pan off here. The rear main is off. I had to disconnect the cross member in order to get enough clearance for that pickup tube to come down, and have my motor supported. There's 2 bolts on the back of the oil pan here, and then on the side of the oil pan here, well, the block, I suppose, and it holds the wire harness up close to the engine block there, that you have to take off 2 10mm bolts. Then there's a bunch of bolts all around there, and then there's 10mm bolts for that rear main. But tomorrow I'm going to run the oil pan and that rear main seal housing through the jet washer, clean it up real good, and then I'm going to be reinstalling with brand new AC Delco gaskets. Felpro's a good equivalent if that's the route you guys go for doing this kind of project, but I just chose AC Delco. They seem to do pretty good, so stay tuned. I got the oil pan prepped. There's factory rivets that hold the gasket in place. What I did is I pulled the gasket off and the rivets were still there. I took a little screwdriver and put just a little bit of pressure on the top rivet piece, and it broke off on both of those. And then you take a pair of needle nose pliers and get behind it and kind of just pry a little pin out through the bottom. And then it leaves a nice non-scratched up hole. But everyone's different, I suppose. I got my rear main out. It's ready to rock and roll. Thing's gonna be clean. It's pretty dirty. Everything's set up. Got to go through its first wash. So I'm driving in my rear main seal for my crankshaft, and I use this piece of metal here to evenly seat it Went back and forth. Got it nice and flush with the aluminum, but I still need to drive it a little bit more in order to get it seated fully. So I took this hub here, and it's a perfect match all the way around. It's a nice flat piece. The teeth doesn't get in the way, or don't get in the way. So this might work perfect. So let's see. So here I am about to seat the rear seal. We're gonna go for an even seal here. Want to make sure it's not folding in on itself. Looks to be all right. Check it again. Do a few more checks. Make sure it's going in flush. Almost there. Looking good so far. Alrighty, there we go. Nice and flush. So I got the rear cover bolted up. New seal in there, the crankshaft and the new gasket on the back side. It's all torqued down to spec, about 216 inch-pounds on all the bolts. And I'm about to install the freshly cleaned oil pan. This thing came out amazing. Super clean. Got all the gunk out. Very nice piece. I put some RTV on that oil cooler hose delete. So yeah, we're about to install it right up there. You want to make sure to put RTV right there in that corner, in the far corner, and then the front case corners. It's very important or you will have leaks. So here we go. Well, here we are. Oil pan's on. It's all torqued down. Got my wire harness connected back. It wraps around the pan. Like I was saying, the bolt up front there, and then the bolt on the side that holds this setup up. Everything's done under here. So up next, I'm gonna be replacing that steering rack. Goes across. So yeah, it's coming together. I'm excited. We're one step closer to driving the sucker. Today, it's out with the old and in with the new. I swapped the boot for the rack shaft. And I swapped the ground wire that goes to the chassis. Everything else is good. I aligned the shaft so when it sits up in there, I can just slip the steering column receiver right in there. You always want to make sure that it's equal length. It's pretty important. And then when taking off the old outer tie rods, you want to count your turns. You want to spin them, and then when you're putting them on each side, you want to count the turns going back on. And that'll get close to what your alignment should be, but you're gonna have to realign it to get a more accurate reading. So I'm gonna get to installing this guy. So I got the rack in place, held on by the bolts. As you look here, the receiver for the steering column and the rack shaft not quite lining up. So you want to take a crescent wrench, you want to rotate that, you want to see which side needs a little more. Which it looks like it needs to go that way a bit. So I'll just crank it to the right and I'll line it up good. So I got the rack in its place, about to tighten down the bolts. Steering rack is all tightened down to the input shaft of the rack. Up next after that is to put the power steering hoses on the rack that are hanging right there. So it's coming together, almost there. Alrighty, ending the night with the rack installed. Power steering lines are hooked up. It's hooked up to the steering column. Got my outer tie rods hooked up, and it ended up being 18 turns on this side, 18 and a half turns on that side, so it's pretty even. Got hooked up good. The rotors look straight. I mean, I'll get a better reading when the wheels are back on. But all's left to do is to bleed the system, which you fill up your power steering fluid, and then you hop in the cab and you turn the wheel back and forth with the vehicle off, and it slowly bleeds fluid into the steering rack. And you do that for a bit and then keep checking your dipstick until there's constantly fluid even when you're just turning it and it's at the right level. So yeah, I call it a success. It looks clean. Gotta do something about those. So as a little bit of pre-prep, I'm gonna be flushing out my transmission cooler lines with this cooler clean made by Lube Guard. This is mandatory. When you have a catastrophic failure with a transmission, these lines and your cooler get totally filled with clutch material and metal, and you want to make sure to get all that stuff out before you put your new transmission in, because it'll suck all that metal and clutch material right into your transmission and contaminate all your brand new fluid. So I'm gonna be flushing it out with this stuff. Pick up a can if you're doing the same type of work. So I got my can of cleaner hooked up. So with GM, they have special push-on fittings. The fitting that goes on the end of this hose from O'Reilly's or wherever you get it, it does not fit in these and it will leak. So we've rigged up a little hose that fits perfectly on that line, and it makes a tight seal. So when you start shooting it, it'll burp it out. There's a ton of gunk in here. Just want to do a nice steady stream. You don't want it to go everywhere. Yeah, it's making its way through. There it is. So I've ran 2 cans of cooler clean through these lines already, and I've dumped out my drain pan, and this is what's still coming out. You can see lots and lots of little fragments of metal. It's coming out cleaner than what was first coming out for sure, but be careful because it will make a big mess. I'm gonna have to run another can through here, hopefully get it out clear, but so far there's still a bunch of metal still in those lines. Definitely wouldn't want this in my brand new transmission. So ending the night, got my transmission cooler lines all blown out. They're nice and clean, the cooler's clean. And while I was under here, installed new wire loom for the transmission harness. The route's all the way down. And I did a little other tape jobs here and there, just cleaning up. So it's gonna be all ready for that transmission to come in here. There's a ton of rubbing on this old loom. I checked all the wires and it didn't seem like there was any rubbing. But over here, here's the old loom. It was worn through quite a bit. It was due to be replaced. So got that done. This is the stuff I used. Just ordered it off eBay. Finally came in the mail. Brand new Pioneer Flexplate and ARP bolts. These are all torqued down to 85 foot-pounds per ARP manufacturing recommendation. This Pioneer Flexplate was tested SFI. It's a race testing foundation. It's all torqued down. It's lined up. Yeah, the old one had a crack in between two bolt holes, and so it definitely needed replaced. Because as soon as the RPM spun up, it would for sure snap. And plus it was causing a chattering with the torque converter. So on the neck of the torque converter, there's chatter marks, as seen in some previous videos. But yeah, it looks good.